This is Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
How much like Robert Duvall are you? This is Wretched Radio. Oh, I hope I've got this reference right. Do you have any tender mercies? That is the question. Was that his movie? I think it was. Robert Duvall.
One of them, yeah.
Because I'm current, hip, and contemporary with the references.
0 for 3, but sure, go ahead.
Well, I'm as contemporary as most contemporary worship services, which aren't all that contemporary. They seem to be of the particular flavor of the pastor. What era did he grow up in? That's contemporary, so that we can keep that alive, which is actually what is motivating this question and conversation about how kind can I be when I disagree with a fellow believer on a non-essential issue. And even when it is an essential issue, how kind can I be? Can I be tender-hearted? That is the question. And worship seems to bring out, potentially, to bring out some of the worst in us when we disagree on worship, because I think we have forgotten that worship, it's not about us. The question is, how does the king desire to be praised? That's what I do. You say, but I don't like that style of music. 2 words, boo and who. Well, I'd prefer if we have this type of instrumentation. And does the king prefer that? Because it doesn't matter. We are here to worship God. The totality of our life is to serve him. And it makes sense, doesn't it, that our worship would be like the rest of our lives. If our entire life is an act of worship, and it is, how do we worship God? By behaving, by becoming filled with more knowledge about him, by becoming a holier people, and in the context of Colossians 3 and going into chapter 4, submitting to the appropriate authority. That is a part of worship too. And so how I talk and think and speak and feel and act, my whole life is worship for the king, the way that he wants me to live. Well, except when we worship on Sunday morning, then we get to do it the way that we want to do it. We do it the way that he wants to, which is why I fall in the camp of the regulative principle of worship. How does God want to be worshiped? We will strive to do that with the elements that he would like to see inside of a worship service. We see them in the Bible, therefore we try to do them today. He regulates our worship. But there are some things, they get cloudy, and they can be preferential, and they could fall underneath the umbrella of Mitteldingen, Mittel things. I see this, but there's also that, and I don't have a verse, and neither do you. Now how do we make a decision on this thing and get along? That is the question. Getting along in disagreement. When we were at the G3 conference over the last few days, I went through a laundry list of issues where it is clear every man that I talked to on the podium, on the stage, they had an opinion about these things. And they were strong opinions. And yet, there are other Christians who also have strong opinions on the completely opposite end of the spectrum. Now what do? Start a new denomination? Divide over these things? For instance, Voddie Baucham, when I was talking to him, said he is actually not only opposed to dividing a church between age demographics. We see that today, don't we? Early service is for the fuddy-dudds. We call it traditional. And then the middle service would be the bridge. And then the last service, when the kids are getting up, it's the contemporary service. And the contemporary would be the contemporary artist of our day. The bridge would be Twyla Paris and Michael W. Smith. And the groups from the 90s, and then the traditional, the hymns, the way that you're supposed to do it. We divide the church into those demographics. Is that a sin? Is that the way that God would have us do it? And the answer is, you've definitely got an opinion on it. I do. I most certainly do. I personally think it is not ideal, because when you go to an early service, what do you see there? Lots of gray hairs, lots of suit and ties. But you don't see a lot of energy and youthful excitement and exuberance. You go to the contemporary service later, and you got the buzz, you got the energy, you've got all kinds of fervor. Not as much wisdom. Put the two together, And you've got a more complete package. Both groups benefiting from one another. And so I think when we separate it, we're dividing the church. And by the way, you're not holding on to the traditions. Because here's what's going to happen. Now that we have 3 different demographics for church division, traditional, bridge, contemporary, eventually the people who like the traditional will be dead, all of them. And we won't do those anymore. You see, we're not holding on to our traditions. We're appeasing a particular group based on their preference for worship. Instead, putting everybody together, working through it lovingly. Now we have a mixed body. Now maybe we're going to have some hymns. Maybe we're going to have good contemporary worship music. We're going to have some form of liturgy. It's going to be done where we're all working together, not to please self, but to please God. And you see one body. When you divide it, you are, divided. Voddie Baucham took it a step further and he said, I don't even like 2 worship services at all. Because then I think you've got 2 churches. You've got the group meeting at 8:30 and you've got the group meeting at 11 or whatever time you do. But they're not together. Even if you do the exact same stuff in both services, it's 2 different bodies. Then I talked to Phil Johnson. Guess what they do at Grace Community Church? They do 2 services, and he insists, nope, there's not 2 bodies. Okay, so now the question is, who's the heretic, Voddie or Phil? And the answer is neither. Why? Because these are subjects that are Mitteldingen. We've certainly got preferences, but we don't go to the mattresses over this. And yet, over and over again, and this is an issue that we see that has caused so much division and acrimony in the body. And we see now other issues, and they are going to never go away. They will never stop because there's always going to be assaults on the truth in the church. And some issues are going to rise to higher levels. For instance, the emergent movement hits evangelicalism. Do we call those Mitteldingen? No, we don't. We say that's a problem. That's a different God. That's a different gospel. That's a different Christianity. Well, that's a different level. We've seen the assault on marriage. We've seen the assault on sexuality. We've most certainly seen the assault on life. Now we're seeing the social justice issue. And let me tell you, that bad boy's causing lots of division today. Now, I need to work through those issues, figuring out those issues in a climate that is cloudy, in a climate that does not allow for human face-to-face interaction, in a climate that is very sound-bitey, in a climate that I believe in evangelicalism is lacking a whole lot of discernment rules being applied to all of these situations. Whatever the issue is, how do I maintain my convictions and still do what Colossians 3:12 tells me to do? That's the trick. And we can't escape it. Jesus puts us into this pickle. You understand the level of issue. All right, how many worship services you're going to do? That's way down there on the list. Sexual issues, way up there on the list. The essentials, obviously, supreme, on top of it all. And I'm going to hold on to those. And yet, even no matter what the level is, I disagree with the believer. I need to recognize what level I need to either hold on loosely or hold on firmly to whatever my conviction happens to be based on its level of importance. And there are degrees of importance in Christian theology. Carpet color, pews, individual chairs, individual cup, common cup, how often we do communion. Those are the important things. But they're not nearly as important as the 5 solas. And what about these other current contemporary issues? Homosexuality, transgender issues, sexuality, marriage, definition of marriage, life issues, now social justice issues. Where do they fit? And when I meet somebody with whom I disagree, how do I treat them even with disagreement? And the answer, of course, is, well, it depends ultimately on the issue, where they stand, how aggressive they're being, and yet, nevertheless, I am called to this. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, I'm going to read my little MacArthur footnotes. Therefore, in the view of what God has done through Jesus Christ for the believer, Paul describes the behavior and attitude God expects in response. Put on tender mercies. Are you like Robert Duvall? Heart of compassion. It is a Hebraism that connotes the internal organs of the human body. used figuratively to describe your emotions. You're kind to people. Goodness toward others that pervades the entire person, mellowing all harsh aspects. Whoa. What do you mean mellowing all harsh aspects? So when we're disagreeing on these things, am I mellow with humility? This is the perfect antidote to the self-love that poisons human relationships. Meekness, gentleness, to suffer injury or insult rather than to inflict hurts, long-suffering, patience, the opposite of quick anger, resentment, or revenge, that epitomizes whom? Jesus Christ. Is there a quick solution, a quick fix to this? Nope. But at least being aware there are levels of degrees of importance that we can hold on to our convictions, and yet we are commanded to exhibit tender mercies. Do you? This is Wretched Radio.
Behold a world without Wretched. Please become a gospel partner